What I'd like to do is tell the story of my teaching trip around the world. Evidently, I'm still going to have an emotional response to it, so forgive me if I appear emotional with it. It's such an unusual thing. It all started when we were pioneering in Barbados, and there had been the formation of the National Assembly. And of course, at that time, we were so fortunate to be where we were because the hands of the cause were traveling through our area, okay? So we got the opportunity to know them, to eat with them, to teach with them. I mean, just things that are such a bounty. I mean, imagine being able to do that. There will never be another generation to do this, okay? So anyhow, Dr. Mahajer came for one of his visits, and Dr. Mahajer was we used to call him the lightning hand. He's in and he's out, okay? And he's in when there's action and he's out when there was no action. I told him that one day, and he said, he laughed, and he said, you know what they call me in Africa? And I said, no. He says, the missing hand. Okay. So anyhow, he came for one of his visits, lightning visits, and it was at a time when, after we had just had the first mass teaching project in Barbados, which was in 1971. And I was a fairly new Baha'i at that time, what I now consider a fairly new Baha'i. At that time I was, a veteran Baha'i, and having become a Baha'i in 1964. So the National Assembly had put on this first mass teaching project in the Caribbean. And so the hands, of course, this is where they would be traveling back and forth because this is what we were doing. And during this project, Ruth Pringle, who was a board member at that time, was before she was appointed consular, came to represent the consulars, and I represented the National Assembly. I was the coordinator of the project. Well, the project was wildly successful. I mean, just enormously, way beyond our expectations, okay? And with this, Ruth kept telling me I needed to go on pilgrimage. I just couldn't see myself going on pilgrimage. That's all there was to it. So finally she kept after me and telling me it was more what it would do for me. And I think that's what tipped it for me. I went home and I told Frank, we were living in St. Thomas, pioneers in St. Thomas at that time. And he said, I think it's a great idea. This has always been Frank's response to any service for the faith. That's a great idea, okay? He's a good man. So I applied for pilgrimage, and so at any time, that someone from a smaller country or anywhere around the world, they gave them some preference. I think I applied in December, and I was scheduled to go in February. Wow, okay. Because of the mass teaching, and there was like 500 new believers right away and 1,500 believers at the end of the project. And with Ruth's help, we had put together this incredible consolidation program. So we could see very quickly that they couldn't handle it. There was a few pioneers there. Phil and Karen Wood were there. Carol Haynes and Wally Haynes were there. And a few local believers, but they couldn't handle it. So I just loved it, right? We volunteered to move to Barbados, to pioneer there, okay? So Frank quit his job, and again, it's for the faith. So we moved down to Barbados, and he had trouble getting a job. But still, this pilgrimage trip is coming up. All right, now, in this interim, this is when Dr. Mahajer visits the island. So if somebody tells him that I'm going on pilgrimage, oh, he says, that's wonderful, that's wonderful, he says, as long as you're going on pilgrimage, he says, why don't you just take a trip around the world? And we laughed. Everybody in the room just laughed. Yeah, right. And we can't even afford to go on pilgrimage, okay? No, he says, really, he says the air traffic, he says, once you're going in a circle, he says, it works out fine. So the next day we pick him up to go someplace, and we're riding along. And he says, "Now about this trip of yours." And I said, "Dr. Bahá'u'lláh," I said, "Yeah, it sounds wonderful." I said, "It would imagine making a teaching trip around the world," but I said, we don't have the money. I really want to go. My husband's not working. I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to go on pilgrimage. Next day, picked up Dr. Bahá'u'lláh to have a cup of coffee at the airport. He says, "When you take this trip," he says, "first, he says, you need to go to London," he says, "because that's where you have to get all the visas for these things." He says, "And I think it'll probably be better if you go to Africa and go in Uganda before you go on your pilgrimage." He says, "I think that will work out a lot better." You know, and I'm like this, and Karen recovers and finds a piece of napkin and starts writing down all the places that he said that I was to go and how long I was to stay in each place. It was specific, okay? I take this home to Frank and Phil, and Karen and I look at this thing and we think, God, you know, this is just incredible. And he told me in each place what I was to do, okay? He said, well, generally, he said, here, he says, I want you to learn. He says, here, you teach, okay? Very interesting. I mean, well, he was around and he knew that he has this world vision, okay? So Karen and I are thinking about that, and Karen says, "You know, Pat," she said, "it really wouldn't do any harm to go down and see if this would work at the travel agent, just to see, you know, and how much it might even cost." We go to this place, and he looks at this travel itinerary, and he says, "Oh, Mrs. Paccassi," he says, you can't make a trip like this." He says, 2 days here, 3 days there. He says, "You're traveling in Africa, in India." He says, British, he says, he's making a joke. He says, "These are the places that fly every other week when the moon is high." The next day he calls back and he says, "You're not going to believe this." He says, "But," he says, "in terms of trying it forward," he said, "I tried it backwards." He said, "And believe it, everything fit exactly as you said." Isn't that amazing? I'm still in shock. I'm still willing to go along with the thing. Okay, I can't see it, and I'm sure at the last minute I'm not going to be able to go. Probably was between a week and 10 days before the trip, right? And in the mail comes a letter from the U.S. government in St. Thomas, where Frank had worked as a statistic officer. And the letter says that they had given some pay raises, and that they were making them retroactive, and this was Frank's check for his share for the past paid. Okay, and we look at the check, and honest to God, it's just so near what we figured the trip was going to be. Okay, so now I got my passport, we've got the money, and I can go. Well, of course, this again throws me in another tizzy. Now this is becoming a little bit more of a reality. I'm a woman traveling alone, and of course, in that time they didn't have wheels on suitcases. So I had this nice big brown bag, and I stuffed the stuff in it that I think do it, and it weighs exactly 44 pounds. I knew, because that was the limit. And I had to schlep that thing all over the world. The first one I did stop in London to get the visas, and I was at a couple of meetings there that they had in the National Center, and of course we went out to see Shoghi Effendi's grave, which was really a wonderful, inspiring thing to do. My first trip then was into Uganda and into Kampala, and the House of Worship courses, that's where it was. And I mean, that House of Worship is just incredible. I mean, there is a feel about that place you just isn't like any other that I've experienced so far, okay? Maureen Krause, who was the was now pioneering in Uganda, had been the secretary of the Foreign Goals Committee back in the States. So she, you know, back and forth, I had known her very nicely. So I stayed with her, and she took me out to the villages, and we did some little teaching out there. And it was really strange when I got to Uganda, because I had always thought that I'd really wanted to go to Africa. In my mind, the images are very different, okay? But when I got to Africa, it's the same as it is in the Caribbean. I couldn't believe it, particularly in Uganda, in the middle of the country, which is where I was. I mean, the vegetation is the same, the people are the same, many of the customs and things that they do are the same. This meeting out in this, you know, with this nice big bamboo thing and all this open air kind of stuff. And of course, I'm always more comfortable in villages than I am with upper level people. While I was there, a Marine had taken me to meet Claire Gunn. And I mean, this was a real honor. She was the one that Shoghi Effendi had called the Mother of Africa. Okay, she was a German lady, had gone originally to Tanzania, and then ended up in Uganda. And she had a school there. And it was known as the best school in the area, so that no matter who was in political power, all her children went to Auntie Claire's school. So she was able to, you know, do many things for the faith because of the school that she had. Okay, she was a great lady. So I had to continue my trip then, and on my way to pilgrimage at this time. So the flight took me through Kenya and into Nairobi airport. And when we got there, then they landed, and the plane was ready to go, and all of a sudden they came in, turned off the engines, and told us, we're sorry that there's something wrong, and they're going to have to get a part for the plane or something. We'll have to put people up overnight. Now, of course, here I am in the middle of who knows. So they put us on this big bus, and they dropped people off at the various hotels, and I'm the last one on the bus. Okay, it's 11 o'clock. I am very happy to be there. I go in, I close the door, I just leave my suitcase, I lay down in the bed. I'm there about 15 minutes, and there's a knock at my door. And I think, oh boy, because every quarter we went down was dark. And remember, you know, it's late at night. And I said, who is it? And the voice says, there's a phone call for you. There's a phone call for me, right? I'm where nobody knows where I'm supposed to be, in a country I've never been to before, and there's a phone call. And I said, a phone call? And he said, yes, miss. But there was no phones in the room. He said, you must come to the desk. So I'm searching my head. I really don't know what to do. I don't know whether to open that door or to put a chair underneath it, kind of under the doorknob kind of thing. And I search my head, and I think, no, it's okay. You can open the door. And I open up the door, and the man is there, the same fellow that brought me there, and he says, come, come, come. So we walk, we walk, we walk, we walk, we walk, we walk, we go right back to the desk, and sure enough, here's the phone with the receiver off. So I pick it up, and I say, hello? And the voice says, is this Mrs. Paccassi? And I said, yes, it is. Well, we just wanted to tell you what time the bus is picking you up tomorrow. We're going to be able to get the plane. So I said, okay, thank you very much. And then I go back and back and back into my room. And I thought about that later, Joyce, and it was like that all the way through my trip. I was able to have my antenna, spiritual antenna, up enough to know whether I was in danger or not, okay? And this, of course, has become an extremely valuable tool, because anyhow, that was one of the things I learned in this dark hotel in the middle of the night. All right, so the next morning, sure enough, they come and we pick it up and we get back there. We go into Israel. Boy, what can you say about pilgrimage? For those of you who have been on a pilgrimage, whether it's once or twice, everything that you do expect do happen there, okay? And things that you don't, that you need spiritually at the time. And it was also interesting in that you get what you need physically, which is a lesson itself, showing you the balance in life. I've learned, I always feel sad when people tell me they never want to go to Haifa again because they'll never, duplicate what they had. And I try to tell them, well, every time you go, you get what you need. And what you need now is not what you needed 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and whenever you left, okay? And since then, of course, I've been, again, extremely fortunate. We're in the right time at the right place to have been in the Holy Land 7 times. And it was 2 pilgrimages, opening of the terraces, 3 international conventions, so just this great bounty. What I wanted to do most when I got there was go to the shrine of Bahá'u'lláh. My connection, primary connection to the faith has always been through Bahá'u'lláh. It took me a while to connect to Abdu'l-Baha, which is strange because usually people tell me it's the other way around, at least in their experience. Mine was directly to Bahá'u'lláh. It was the first creative word I ever read. And it didn't take long for me to recognize what it was. So that's why So I really wanted to get to that shrine. So I'm in my room and I'm looking at my program, and we're not scheduled for the shrine of Bahá'u'lláh for 3 days. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure I could wait that long, okay? So I look at the thing and I read the instructions very, very carefully. Because I'm basically a rule follower, okay? I really am. That's the way I've been raised, all right? And he says, the brochure says that's when the group is to go, but it doesn't say you can't go any other time, okay? I think I'm onto something here. So the first free period time I had, which was the next day, I get directions and I find my way and I get on the bus and I schlep myself all the way out to the shrine of Bahá'u'lláh. Okay? Well, when I get there, there's nothing scheduled, there's no other groups, there's no one there. So I'm alone in the shrine of Bahá'u'lláh. As I begin to advance to the threshold, I begin to cry. And the closer I get, the harder I cry, until I'm just absolutely sobbing. And I fall down on my knees and I'm like, so I just can't do anything else but sob. And as I'm like this, I feel on my back. You know how when you have a child who is upset and you've got the child and you're just sort of patting it back, or you have an animal that's excited and you just stroke them back a little bit. I feel this on my back. Okay? I feel the stroking on my back. And the thought or the voice says, all right, now you know. And I realized that what I was experiencing was the power of Bahá'u'lláh. And I had been a gritty little one who wanted to come in alone, okay? But I was so new, I honestly, I didn't think of it that way. It's just that I wanted to go so bad, okay? But there was no one else in the shrine to absorb some of the power, okay? Because as you know, when you're in that shrine, there's many people, and they help to absorb all this power that's in there. And I got it all. I got it all. Well, then I got out, and the woman took one look at me when I got out there. This lovely Persian caretaker just fed me all kinds of hot, sweet tea and cookies and such to give me the sugar to, just sort of help get my equilibrium back. And I took the bus back, and I just sobbed the whole time back, too, because it was just that was the crowning thing of my pilgrimage. There were other incidences that were wonderful. One of them was thrilling, actually. When I was a new Baha'i and people were always late for meetings, it used to always upset me. And everybody said, oh, that's a Baha'i time. That's okay, don't worry about it. That's Baha'i time. The groups in those days were small. There was only about 20 people in our group, okay? So you got to know her. You were really family at that time. So we had our meeting scheduled to meet the Universal House of Justice, okay? So we all gathered there a little bit early, and about 10 to 4 people, I noticed people are starting to shepherd us, you know, in, and there's seats, and we sit down in the seats, and I look up at the clock, and it's 4 o'clock, and at 4 o'clock, the door opens up, and the members of the House of Justice come out, and I said, that's Baha'i time. Don't tell me any different. And I don't think up to this day or since I've ever seen anything more thrilling than watching those come out. God, whew, I don't know what it was. It just struck my heart so much. Okay. I went to a couple of other places after pilgrimage, and one of them was to see the museum that they put up with the Dead Sea Scrolls and all the rest of them. And in the garden, they had 2 pieces of Rodin's work. That one piece was one of the most gorgeous things I think I've ever seen. My next visit then was into Iran. And this, of course, was a very special time for me, and it's special at that time, because remember, this is in the early 70s. And it was, as I was saying, it was serious, but it wasn't critical yet. They were still able to have visitors go in there. And our National Assembly of the Windward Islands had written ahead to all of the different places that I was going to be to introduce me. So the NSA of Iran knew I was coming. And they do a great courteous thing for other, you know, traveling NSA members and for pilgrims. And I had just come from pilgrimage as well. And besides, they didn't get that many outside visitors, so they were very happy to get news. So they had arranged a very packed and thrilling agenda of trips for me. The next journey that they had for me was to go to Shiraz. And of course, this is where the House of the Bab was. And it, of course, at 72, had not been demolished yet. It was taken in. There were caretakers there who welcomed me as well as a visitor. But the person who took me didn't come in. I was just allowed to come in. And you come in and you see the courtyard, you know, that shot you see with this lovely little orange tree there. And then they took me up, and you look up and you see the beautiful stained windows up above that. And then they begin to walk me up, and as you walk in the stairs up to the room where the Bab was, and the stairs, Joyce, are about like this, okay? So you've seen this shot many times, okay, of the room where the Bab met Hussein and was able to do his declaration that night. You know, the picture with the rug and the chandelier sitting over and the stained windows behind it. That's the room they took me into, okay? So I am there saying prayers, and then, truly, I'm not sure what happened. I don't know where I was, what I was receiving, but this was my second exchange with first Bahá'u'lláh and now the Bab, okay? This connection that I was so privileged to be able to have. And again, I'm in the room by myself. I, sometime later, sort of came to, okay? And I had been unconscious on one level, not physically, clearly, well, yeah, physically, but I was on my knees, and I had been there so long that there had been a stone had a little sharp stone that had been in the rug that had, you know, burrowed itself into my knee. Okay, and I looked, and the gentlemen were already gone. So I mean, I was able. You know, it's one of those mysteries. I may never know about it. Okay, but I know it happened, and I know it had a significance in my life, because here I was experiencing the power with the manifestation, and I thought about that so many times, Joyce, and so many lessons in it. I mean, just the stone in there, the pain connected with your journey, your spiritual journey. Okay, and yet, in times you're transported someplace else that you're really not sure about. So, and I mean, when I think, I mean, really, I was in the room that started a dispensation destined to last 500,000 years, and I was there. Wow. Isn't it? I mean, it's just, when I was a new Baha'i, I used to go around sort of with yeah, why me, Bahá'u'lláh? And all of a sudden I thought one day, oops, maybe he'll say someday, yeah, why you? So I quit saying that. I just say thank you now. Not a why me anymore, just thank you. Okay, I'm grateful for it. Also, then while we were there in Shiraz, we got to go to probably was one of the centers, and we saw some of the early photographs of the Holy Family and such. And then they took me to, I think my next trip was to the house of Bahá'u'lláh in Tehran. Okay, I took the plane and went back to Tehran. And that was funny because it's in the middle of a busy section, okay, and there's cars parked on the street, and we're sort of skulking along, you know, from car to car to car, like nobody would know who we were, right, kind of stuff. I'm sure they have endless spies there watching the houses, all the places of Bahá'u'lláh. I'm sure they do. So anyhow, we went in the house, and of course it's a marvel of Persian architecture and rooms and such, but there was no emotional. It was interesting. It probably was so full I just couldn't have handled one more experience like that of any kind. Okay, but again, to be in that house. I mean, you think of the past dispensations. I mean, they didn't have that. They just didn't have that, and we do. And here we're able to use this medium to share it with other people. Wow, that's wow. I also then was taken to Isfahan and was able to visit the house of the twin martyrs, okay? And, but again, the Isfahan has a much more rural feel to it. It was much more traditional, and so I had to wear a chador when I was going through there. So when I walked in the courtyard of the house, the two women of the household just fell down laughing. Because here I am in my chador, you know, up to here, and these big blue eyes of mine just shining out, and my Western shoes. Yeah, I really am a disguise in that chador. And India, of course, is just so huge, okay? And I remember how I'm coming from a little island of Barbados, right? So to begin these large, incredible journeys through India in itself was an experience. The people there were very gracious with me, but there's so much poverty there that it just, my heart hurt the whole time I was there. So they had me take a train to go down to the house of the doctor. So I called her. She said, okay, you get one of the rickshaws, she says, and I'll give you the address, and he'll bring you to my house. Okay. All right, so I get there, and I'm in a rickshaw. I've never been in a rickshaw in my life. This is like 4 o'clock in the morning. Okay. And we go, and of course it's not like a car. It takes a little while to get someplace in a rickshaw. I get to the house, and of course the family is absolutely charming. I'm just to stay there, and she's to tell me where to go. So what she decides to do is send me to Jaipur, which is where they were having some delegate elections, and she thought it would be very nice if I would go and join that. While I was there, I was to meet and stay with another Persian family who'd been pioneers there for a long, long time. Nazrin was her name, and she was an incredible young woman. In India, of course, everywhere you go, they put these lovely leis, you know, and the more distinguished visitor that they think you are, the more leis that you get, you know, so I'm all the way up in this thing. So I'm sitting in the delegate election, and then I get invited after the election to go next door to have lunch, and I see nobody's eating, okay, and I realize what they're doing is waiting for me. All right, so I don't know what I'm going to do with this food. So as I pick the little dish up, and as it gets closer and closer to my nose, the smell starts coming in. It's so highly spiced, okay? India, oh God, the food in India is so, and as I got here, but I got to eat it. What am I going to do? I am not going to refuse it. The food, I ate it, but the food was so hot, it blistered my mouth, okay? I had hoped and longed to meet Mr. Fazey while I was there. Mr. Fazey never traveled in the Caribbean, and for some reason I just had this pull to Mr. Fazey, okay? When I was in north, he was in south. When I went south, he came north. So I never got to meet him while I was there. And the next year in Haifa, I did have a chance to see him, which is another wonderful story, but you know, it's not part of the trip. But it is part of the trip because it was fulfilled. I left India to go to Burma, and my flight was delayed, and I sat in that airport all night waiting for my flight. And I was able to go the next day, and the whole National Assembly had come to the airport to meet me the day before, and I wasn't on that airplane, okay? And then I find out that what they had arranged for me was to go to Abdul Baha's village. Okay. And as I was late and that plane wasn't there, I just didn't get to go, okay? Now that was the only thing that if I'm to have any regret, and I don't, but if I were going to, that would be it, okay? But I did give a talk at the National Center, and of course, it was interesting in Burma. It's the only place in the world I ever felt tall. Everybody there is short. I mean, even the men are shorter than I am. Oh man, I know how the rest of the world feels now. So I gave this talk at the National Center, and the National Secretary spoke English, so he did the translating. I don't know if you've ever given a talk with translators, okay, particularly Baha'i talks, because you really don't know what they're saying, okay? You know what you're saying, but you're not really sure if they know what you said in order to convey it back again, all right? So I'm looking at this, and again, here's the men in the front, and the women are all lined in the back, okay? So I'm thinking, what should I talk about? So guess what I talked about? The equality of men and women. So I'm beginning to get into it, and of course, as I got into it, Joyce, I got into it, okay? So, and he's translating this national secretary, and he starts to laugh. And he's translating, but he's laughing so hard he has to wipe the tears away from his eyes. And I'm thinking, what is he telling them? God, what is he telling them? Oh, nah, okay. But I trust him. There's nothing else I can do. But he just thought the concepts were hilarious. I mean, there's just no, in my examples, he just couldn't believe that women would do things like that kind of stuff. Okay. All right, so after the talk was over, and we begin to socialize, and I go up and I talk to the women, okay? And about an hour later, one of them comes up and says to me, "We loved that talk you gave, and you
have inspired us that what we need to do is step up and be with our men. So we have told them tomorrow we're going out teaching with them. Okay, laugh all you want to. All right, from Burma I went to Thailand, and it was there, I was just there a couple of days. I stayed in the house of Shirin Fazdar, who was one of the early people in that part of the country. She brought in the first believer in Southeast Asia, Yankee Long, and he of course was a counselor in his own right later. So, but I was able to go and see some of the temples they have. I think I did a little sightseeing while I was there. It was nice. I hadn't done really much very sightseeing. The next place we went to was Singapore, and Singapore was very nice. They did the one thing there that I hadn't seen done on the trip yet. They had went to somewhat of a local Baha'i center, and when I got there, they had this nice big blackboard that said, "Welcome, Mrs. Paccassi," you know, and I thought that was so sweet. Okay, I was very happy there. We went around and I gave some talks and worked with the young people a little bit. And then one of the young men asked me if I would go with him to visit a young believer, foreign believer, but who wasn't able to travel to get out much. And she didn't get many visitors, but she'd love to have him. Would I go with him? I said, yes, of course. So, you know, and in Singapore you go by boat. You know, we went to this place, to that, okay. So, and we traveled, and we finally came to this, it was dark, full dark by this time, and we came to this huge house. And it turned out that this young girl was the daughter of one of the ambassadors. And he, but she was a Baha'i and her family wasn't. And of course they traveled a lot. He was in foreign service, and she was lonely a lot, but not allowed to travel by herself very much. So we sat in the kitchen of this huge house and we talked, but I had to get back because the boat stopped, you know, running at a certain time. So my young friend said we had to go, and so she walked us down, she walked us out, she walked us to the gate, and as we were saying goodbye, she just ran to me, embraced me, and started to cry. And her crying went to a sob. And she just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed on my shoulders. Okay? And as I could just feel her, Joyce. And that was something that she needed so much. And I don't know what it was that I gave her, but whatever it was, it caused this release, okay? And here again are some of the things that when you're on pilgrimage, if you're open and on teaching trips, you can do things that other people can't do. That's why they're so valuable. They're just absolutely, sometimes you can be a pain in the neck, but sometimes you do things that are really, really valuable. Singapore, traveled to the Philippines. That was really fun too. They took me travel teaching a lot of places, and I was very happy to do this, to go to the villages, because this is where I'm really happy. Okay, I'm really comfortable with village people. I just sort of settle in. Okay, I can do high level stuff, but I'd function better at the village level. So we would travel, and I remember this one house we came to. It was 2 or 3 stories, and I stepped up, and I went to step in the house, and I looked, and the floor was made of bamboo. And I stepped back, because I thought, is that going to hold me? It's like, you know, the crazy thoughts that come to your mind. And yet, I mean, here, then I look around the room, and I mean, there's couches, there's chairs, there's television. So, okay, I guess it'll hold me as well. But I'd never seen floors made of bamboo before. Okay, it was very interesting. We were doing about 5 villages a day in our traveling, okay? We would go as far as we could from, from cars to buses to bicycles to walking, everything, but 5 a day. And the people are so hospitable. And so everywhere we go, you must eat. And as soon as you get into the house, the women disappear and they start cooking. Okay. Well, now, Joyce, this means now I was eating 5 full meals a day. Okay. You cannot not eat it when people go to this thing for. But it was okay because remember I wasn't eating in India. So I had lost some, and now in the Philippines I can start picking it up. The young lady, Joyce, who was my constant guide, came from an upper level family. And on her, she was like a great Baha'i teacher, great Baha'i teacher. She was one that you think of attractors for the faith. I mean, they're magnetic. They just draw people to them. Well, she was like that. Okay. So she would take me someplace and sit me down and keep bringing me people to teach the faith to. From there then, after the Philippines, went into Hong Kong. I was met at the airport by 2 very eager young men. Mrs. Paccassi, come, we gotta go. Okay, we gotta go, where we gotta go. So we rush out, we get in the cab. Where are we going? Dr. Mahajer wants to see you. Dr. Mahajer wants to see me? How does Dr. Mahajer know I was on that airplane? Kind of thing, because I have not had any contact with him at all since way back in Barbados when he had first planned this trip. So I come, they bring me in, sure enough, there's Dr. Mahajer sitting there. He says, how are you? He says, he says, you having a wonderful trip? Yes, sir, I'm having a wonderful trip. He says, let me see your tickets. Okay. So now everything is electronic tickets, but at that time, tickets for a trip around the world were sort of like this. Okay, so he's flipping through the thing. Okay, he says, I have a little something I want you to do. He says, there's a team. He says, I want you to change your trip and go into Japan. He says, there's someone waiting for you there. He says, there's a team waiting for you, and I want you to join this team and go teaching. Okay. And it turned out that and I asked her, how did you know where I was? He had gone in and he had visited Colombia and was in the house of my spiritual mother, Maxine Roth, who, of course, had a copy of the itinerary of my trip. So he knew where, he remembered it, and rearranged this thing for me. Okay. I then got this revised itinerary, so I get into Japan. And it was probably about 6, 7 o'clock, getting into night. And the immigration officer looks at my ticket, and he looks at not my ticket, my passport. He goes, I'm thinking, oh my God, what? And I'm thinking, my picture dropped out. It turns out, because Dr. Mahajer had changed my itinerary, I didn't have a visa to go into Japan. Okay. So what they were going to do was to send me back to Okinawa and get which was the nearest American embassy, and then send me back to Japan. Well, this would not do. I've got a team waiting for me. So I tell the immigration officer and the people, they take me aside, they put me inside, and I tell them, there's people waiting for me. Well, what's the people's name? Well, I don't know. Well, are they American? Are they Japanese? I don't know. Where are you going to be staying? Well, I'm not sure. Okay. I mean, nothing like looking suspicious, right? And this officer, he's looking through my passport, and we've got all this stuff. He doesn't know what to do with me. And you say, I'm not being the ugly American. I'm being very calm. I'm being very, okay. So he can't just put me on the plane, which is what he would do if I'd given him an instant's trouble. So finally he says to me, does your husband let you travel alone? I said, yes, sir, he does. And I said, okay. Anyhow, he finally decides he doesn't know what to do with me. He says, all right, he says, go to the hotel. He says, but you have to come back first thing in the morning to my office and we'll straighten this out with the embassy. Yes, sir, okay. So 9 o'clock in the morning, I come back and he looks at me. He can't believe that I'm there. See, what he had thought I would do was just come in, stay the 4 days and leave, and he wouldn't have to deal with me again. Rule followers, Baha'is aren't going to get killed. Okay. So we went through a whole rigmarole, finally get a temporary visa by making phone calls, different places. All right. Then it's time for me to go to where I'm supposed to go. Okay, well, I find out through another phone call that I'm supposed to go to a place called Fukuoka, okay? Well, in the 70s, while there is almost zero English being spoken at that time, on the radio is all this music of Glenn Miller's back from World War II. Don't sit under the apple tree with, I mean, I can't believe what I'm hearing. Anyhow, so getting directions is not easy. So I finally find my way to the train station. I get to the train station, some kind person, I'm showing them the ticket, Fukuoka. They show me where to stand. I'm standing there waiting for the train stops right exactly with the door. What my kind of country, right? Schedule on time, okay. The door opens up, I get in, thank God I've got the train going to Fukuoka. I sit down, I relax, and I'm thinking, how will I know where to get off? Everything's written in Japanese. There's no English anywhere. Okay. Fortunately, I get besieged by 2 or 3 young girls on the train who want to learn and practice the little English they know. So it turns out that Fukuoka is the last stop. Okay. Thank God. When the train is empty, I get off. All right. I get up. By this time, it's late, Joyce. It's really getting to be about 9:30, 10 o'clock, okay? And I'm waiting in this long line to get to the taxi driver, to get to this address that they've given me to where the team is waiting for me. I showed it to the man. No, okay. So we get in and we drive and we drive and we drive and we drive and we drive. We drive a little bit more and he gets out of the car. And there's nobody around. It's about 11 o'clock by this time. And we look up the road, and one guy is coming down the road. And they're not getting anywhere. They're scratching their head. And I got to get into this thing, right? So I say, Baha'i Center. And that new guy looks at me. He says, Baha'i Center. Baha'i Center. And then he says, so. So. They really do say that in Japan. And we pile, oh boy, that taxi driver is so happy, and we pile back in the taxi, and we get there, and he comes to the place, and he, big smile, he points there, and the big sign says, Baha'i Center. And as I'm getting out of the taxi, I hear some people talking, and someone says, who's that? And some one of the teachers with his weary voice says, I don't know, probably the teacher we're waiting for. Welcome to you too, sweetheart. We had a wonderful teaching for 4 or 5 days, and they used translators for us. They hired young university students to do this, okay? Oh, and it was here that I found a job for Frank, because one of those pioneers ran a school. And because I loved the country so much, and it was for English, speaking English as a second language, she said, of course, I'll hire Frank. And so I was going home, boy, I'm happy. We got a job, we got a place to be in a country I love. They have all kinds of gadgets everywhere, and I love gadgets. Boy, that was right up my alley. All right, so I think, all right, this is a place. I found my place. All right, we'll go. All right. I leave there and I go to Hawaii. Well, my visit in Hawaii coincided with the Hand of the Cause, Collis Featherstone, which means I sort of hustled for myself. I found my own way, and I found out that later by reading a book, that Hawaii being a hub in the Pacific that received so many travel teachers and so many people, that if you weren't a hand of the cause, you just sort of had to, you know, it wasn't personal. They had just too many people coming through, and they just couldn't handle all they had. All right, so there was a meeting. I did get the meeting with Mr. Featherstone. Now, remember, I'm just coming from pilgrimage. I'm coming from a world teaching trip where all these wonderful things had happened. And Mr. Featherstone is giving me his talk. Well, he's up there. I'm like way back in the back. In the course of his talk, he says, after all, he says, all Bahá'u'lláh wants is your capacity. And I laughed out loud. Oh, is that all he wants? He just wants your capacity. And when he heard me laugh, he looked around to see who it was, and he smiled. He knew that I was hearing what he was saying. Okay. When I left Hawaii, I went into Wilmette on my way home, and I was very happy. I was met at the airport by Eileen Norman, and she was then Secretary of Foreign Affairs. And I told her, you know, that I'd found a job. Boy, thank God, Eileen, I found a place around the world where I can get a job for free. And she says, well, I'm afraid that's not going to work, Pat. I said, they don't need pioneers. Well, no, she says. Actually, she says, we've had a cable from the House of Justice. A cable from the House of Justice? About. She said, yes, she says, they said that you are to remain on Barbados as pioneers, and that we're to subsidize you if necessary. Okay, that's another light. Okay, and how the House got into it was that in teaching reports and such, and it was picked up in our NSA minutes, who was picked up in Foreign Goals minutes, and somebody picked it up in Haifa, and it was brought to the attention. And there it was, okay? Because there had been a notation about our moving to Barbados as pioneers from the House of Justice. They had said how commendable this was for us. So they really wanted us to stay there at that point, because the formation of the new National Assembly of the Windward Islands was just happening, okay? On my way home, then, I stopped in Florida to visit for a couple of days with Shirley Yarborough. And Shirley had been on the first mass teaching team that we'd had in Barbados. So we had become very good friends. And I spent 2 days trying to convince her that she would be just incredible as a pioneer in our area. And of course, I found out that Norway was also competing for Shirley Yarborough because she'd done a teaching trip over there. And you know, with this trip, again, remember where I'm coming from, okay? So I mean, I'm getting all kinds of stuff going in on me. And I remember saying to Shirley, Shirley, if you don't come, I think you're going to regret it. And she looked at me, and she's been here and stayed ever since. And I came home and told Frank all the news. And of course, we were only a week or so away from the formation of the National Assembly, the first NSA, because Dr. Moja Hajar had said that it was important that I'd be there. Where Rahia Khanum arrived, because she was going to be the representative for the House of Justice. She was on her way to the temple dedication in Panama from Barbados. When Khanum came out to the house for supper one night, she's so wonderful. God, I love that woman. There's a picture of her in every room in my house. Okay, I have dreams of her. She comes and visits me in dreams. Okay, I can't call it, but she does come, and sometimes she's chatting, sometimes she'll holler at me like she used to in real life. And to have her there as part of the climax, okay, of this trip. And it just, there was so much that had happened, okay? And so many things, and just way too much to take in. Not only at that time, but even now. As you see, even as I go back over it, I can still feel the effect of it on me, okay, on my soul. But sometimes I do wonder, you know, why ones are chosen, you know? And you know, it's funny, I've often thought of having worked in the teaching field for so long, because we've been here now 46 years in the Caribbean, that I find that Baha'is, when you find them, because you know, we don't make Baha'is, we find them, okay? It reminds me, the physical symbol is sort of like how you find gold, you know? It comes in the veins. And I find that when there's one in one family, there's going to be more in another family, okay? So in this idea, this may be just idle fancies, but it seems to me that this may be part of my spiritual, physical heritage. That in other dispensations, perhaps there were those who were some of the earlier believers. Okay? And that takes away the personal thing from it. You don't have to ask, why me? How do I deserve this? It's where you were created. Okay? And that trip showed me that there's so many things to do for the faith on so many levels. It's not just one level. And we all have all these various skills, and we use them in different ways. And when will we begin to appreciate that of each other? Okay? In thinking back in this combination of this, both of this pilgrimage and this teaching trip, what has occurred to me is the idea of this balance and the ways to serve. Okay, and one of the quotes that was revealed for one of the hands of the cause that was appointed by Bahá'u'lláh, Ibn Askra, I don't know how to pronounce it. And it's the quote I'm sure you're familiar with: the movement itself from place to place has always been one undertaken for the sake of God. You know, and I mean, it goes on. And so when we do this is the age in which we can arise to serve in this way. So how wonderful to be able to combine these two, of this pilgrimage and this teaching trip. And if people only knew and understood, it's not what they give, it's what they get. That there would be no thinking about any other means, material or any other way to do it. We just do it. My spiritual mother, Maxine Roth, was told by Donald Witzel when he was very tired one day. He's sitting down, he's got his head down, he's exhausted. Maxine comes up to him and she says quietly, "What can you tell me about pioneering that, Mr. Witzel?" And Donald, without lifting his head, says, "Go." That might be a watchword for all.